All right, so today we're really diving into something that's got me curious.
Okay.
Proxmox.
Okay.
Specifically, we're tackling the question, is using this powerful virtualization platform for just one virtual machine overkill?
Mm-hmm.
Or could it actually be a stroke of genius? We've got a mountain of articles and user experiences to unpack here.
Yeah.
So let's get to it.
You know, it's funny you frame it that way because at first glance, it does seem a little extra right.
Right.
Like using a supersonic jet to grab groceries down the street.
Right. I mean, if you're just running one thing, why not keep it simple?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, and this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Our deep dive uncovered some serious advantages, even when people are just starting out with a single VM.
Okay. Color me intrigued.
Yeah.
So what's the first nugget of wisdom from our research pile?
Snapshots.
Okay.
Imagine this. You're trying out a new software update, and boom, it completely tanks your system.
Oh, nice.
Instead of that sinking feeling of, well, there goes my afternoon,
Yep.
you hit rewind. Proxmox snapshots can literally revert your server to a previous state. Like nothing happened.
Okay. That alone would have saved me from countless headaches over the years.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've messed up an installation and wished I could just, like, undo it.
Yeah, and that's precisely the beauty.
Yeah.
The research even gave this example. Say you've got a 100 gittable virtual machine.
Okay.
You're doing backups, which is great, but it takes time.
Right.
With Proxmox Backup Server, or PBS,
Okay.
you get this thing called deduplication.
Okay.
So let's say only 5 gittables of that VM actually changed since your last backup.
Okay.
PBS is smart. It only backs up that tiny 5 gittable, not the whole shebang.
Wow.
Saves you tons of space and makes the whole process lightning fast.
Wow, that's huge. Especially as someone who's guilty of hoarding digital files, I can appreciate that.
Sure.
So we've got easy snapshots, super efficient backups.
Right.
What else makes Proxmox tempting, even for a single VM setup?
Let's talk about those moments when you're as far away from your server as physically possible, yet it decides to act up. Proxmox has this really sleek web-based interface,
Okay.
meaning you can manage your server from anywhere with an internet connection.
Oh, tell me more about this, because I've totally been there, stuck without access to my main machine when something goes wrong.
Yeah.
So with Proxmox, I can just log in from my phone or...
You get it? Reboot check on things, even restore from a backup, all from a web browser.
Okay.
It's like having a virtual IT department on call 24/7 no matter where you are.
Okay, that is a game changer,
Right.
especially if your server is mission critical.
Right.
Now, the source material also touched on something called future-proofing, which sounds intriguing.
It's all about scalability.
Oh, yeah.
Today, you might only need one VM.
Sure.
But tomorrow, who knows?
Right.
Proxmox is built to grow with you.
Okay.
Want to add another VM? No problem.
Okay.
Want to experiment with those lightweight Linux containers, LXCs? Go for it.
So it's kind of like starting with a studio apartment, but knowing you can easily add on rooms as your needs evolve.
Exactly.
Right.
And those LXCs I mentioned, think of them as even more streamlined virtual environments, perfect for running specific services without the overhead of a full VM.
Okay.
Like imagine a super fast, lightweight mini server just for that web app you're building.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This is what's so cool about Proxmox. Even if you just dip your toes in, it's like, hey, want to get fancy with virtualization? We got you covered.
Right.
But our research also highlighted this cool concept of hardware abstraction. What's that all about?
So it's one of the biggest benefits of virtualization. Imagine this. You've been running your server off an old hard drive. It's slow, it creaks, it's practically a museum piece.
Been there.
With Proxmox, you can move your entire VM to a shiny new SSD.
Okay.
No need to reinstall your operating system, your applications, all your cat pictures. It's just a smooth migration.
Now, that is what I call an upgrade without the agony. And speaking of things that could go wrong, what if your hardware totally kicks the bucket?
Another win for Proxmox. Because your VM isn't tied to that specific physical machine, you can restore it onto a completely different server. Minimal downtime, way less stress.
Music to my ears. But let's talk performance for a sec. I
Yeah.
feel like there's this idea that virtualization automatically means slower speeds. Is that true, or is that just an old wives' tale?
Yeah, it's a concern people definitely have, but it's not necessarily the reality anymore.
Okay.
The research highlighted how modern hypervisors like Proxmox, with its use of KVM, that's kernel-based virtual machine, have become incredibly efficient. Yeah,
So for someone like me not running a massive data center, more like a home server for projects, I probably wouldn't even notice a difference.
most likely not.
Okay.
Proxmox is built to be lean, minimal RAM usage, minimal CPU usage. It's not going to turn your server into a slug, that's for sure.
That's reassuring to hear because
Mhm.
resource hogging is a pet peeve of mine. But let's say I am doing something more demanding down the line.
Sure.
Can I tweak Proxmox to allocate more resources to a specific VM?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You have fine-grained control over how much CPU, power memory, and disk space each VM gets.
Okay, so you can really fine-tune things for optimal performance. I like it. Now, it's been pretty much all sunshine and roses for Proxmox so far.
Right.
But spill the tea. What are some potential drawbacks our listeners should be aware of?
Well, tech is perfect, right? One thing that came up is the complexity factor, especially for super simple setups.
Yeah.
If someone's perfectly content running one operating system, maybe a couple of Docker containers sticking with a basic OS might be the simpler route.
Like if your needs are super minimal, bringing in a whole virtualization platform could feel like overkill.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Why bring out the power tools when a simple screwdriver will do?
Fair enough. And even if Proxmox itself is pretty user-friendly, I imagine there's still a bit of a learning curve when you're first getting started with virtualization.
Absolutely. The interface is designed to be intuitive, but there's always a bit of a learning curve when you're diving into new tech, especially if you're unfamiliar with concepts like VMs, storage, and networking.
Right.
But hey, that's part of the fun, right?
Totally. And thankfully, with great documentation and a supportive community, it doesn't seem like you're left fending for yourself.
Exactly. Any other potential bumps in the road we should flag?
Well, you mentioned resource usage. While Proxmox is designed to be lightweight, are there any situations where it might actually slow things down?
There's one more scenario to consider, though. It's less likely to be a deal breaker with today's hardware.
Hmm.
On very low-powered devices, think a really old laptop or something, that extra layer of virtualization might cause a noticeable performance dip.
Got it. So something to keep in mind if you're working with ancient tech, but probably not a big deal for most people with a modern server setup. So where does all this leave us in our quest to determine if Proxmox for a single VM is overkill or pure genius?
Honestly, it's a bit of both in a good way. It all comes down to your individual needs and priorities. It's like choosing between a Swiss Army knife and a really nice chef's knife. Both can get the job done, but they excel in different areas.
I like that analogy. Okay, so let's break it down for our listeners. If someone is perfectly happy with a single operating system, maybe running a few basic services, and they value simplicity above all else, what's the verdict?
For them, a bare metal setup might be the way to go. No need to overcomplicate things if a straightforward approach meets your needs.
But for those who crave flexibility, want room to grow, and prioritize things like bulletproof backups and easy migration, that's where Proxmox really shines, right?
Absolutely. It's like having a tech safety net plus a whole playground of possibilities for future projects. And the research we dug into really emphasized that peace of mind. Even with just one VM, you're learning, experimenting, and knowing your data is secure.
As someone who's lived through the nightmare of data loss, I can definitely vouch for that peace of mind factor.
Right. It's about having the freedom to explore without that nagging fear of breaking everything.
And that's such a great point to end on. We've explored the ins and outs of Proxmox, from its awesome snapshotting features to its potential learning curve. But now we want to hear from you, our listeners. Imagine the possibilities if you could effortlessly spin up and manage multiple virtual machines. How would that change the game for your projects, your workflow, your tech life in general? Hit us up on social media and let us know your thoughts.
Now that's a question that'll get the gears turning.
It sure will. And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of Proxmox. We hope you've enjoyed this journey into the heart of server virtualization. Until next time, happy tech exploring.